Once I have my plan done here, I'm going to transfer my image to this blue sheet of paper. You're going to be using pencil in case you make mistakes. I used pen just so that we can see it just a little bit more clearly. And I started by adding my light source afterwards. So once I had my snowman drawn, I colored in my light source to sort of help me figure out where to put my tints or my reflections from the sun. So if this is my sun, it's going to be shining down, and I'm going to draw an invisible line from the middle of my sun to the middle of each circle. So if I'm going this way, then I know my brightest spot is going to be on this side of my snowman. So I'm going to start by making this part of my snowman the lightest, like this. And it should be sort of in a circular pattern. The only reason why I'm sort of skipping over this is because that nose is going to have a different type of reflection on there. So I'm just skipping over that. And again, making sure that it's this part of my snowman that's going to be the lightest. So if you notice, I'm going pretty lightly here. If you notice, I'm going pretty lightly here because I can always press harder and make it a little bit brighter. And then just like in our practice, my brightest part is going to be like a circle right about here, and then just make it fade a little bit more as it gets farther from that. Okay, so I'm starting with the lightest parts. So this is his head so far, and it's already beginning to look a little bit more three-dimensional. If you notice, this light spot is not a straight line. It's sort of this circular area behind the nose, and that's how you want your light spots to be too. Otherwise, it's not going to look three-dimensional. So it should be a circle that's closest to the sun, and then it radiates and gets a little bit lighter as it goes away from that. And I'm going to do the same thing with each of these sections. So for this section right here, if my sun up here is shining down on it, then this is actually going to be the brightest part, but since it's behind my, behind the scarf, I'm just going to skip over that. And I'm just going to really lightly at first color around it. So I'm just keeping it light around here, like this. And again, just like this is sort of in a circular pattern up here, I want this one to be sort of a circular light spot. And you can see that I'm pressing so lightly that it almost blends in, it fades into the blue that I have here. And that's what you guys want to do too. And again, the lightest part would have been right here. So I'm just going to make it a little bit brighter here on this side of my snowman like this. And then it just should get a little bit more faded as it gets farther from that spot. Like that. And then I'm going to do the same thing with that last section. Once I have these three parts that show the highlights, the reflections, then I can move on to the shadows. So now I'm going to be using a black crayon, and I'm going to think about where my shadow will be on each section of the sphere. So again, if this is my sun and it's shining down this way, what I like to do is put my hand like this, move against my snowman here, and I know that this bottom half right here is going to be my curved shadow. It's really important that we draw lightly at first because we don't want hard lines, and also that you curve your shadow because this is a sphere. It's not going to be a straight line across. It's just going to be a curved line where the shadow sort of follows the side of this sphere here. So as I get closer to the edges, it's going to be darker and darker and darker. And again, we don't want to see any hard lines. We want it to get, we want it to fade very nicely as it moves towards that white part right up there. So I'm going to do that for each section here. Now that I've got some nice shading done, I can also add the shadow of my snowman. So again, I'm always thinking about where my light source is. And this, for the shadow, I'm only thinking about the very bottom sphere of the snowman that is actually touching the snow. So I'm going to draw an invisible line from the middle of my sun down to the middle of my bottom sphere here, and then it's just going to keep going, and I know that my shadow is going to go in that direction. And I'm going to be very careful to jump over my little hat that I have drawn here. And then I'm going to draw these elongated spheres here, circles, and then I'm also going to make it look like he's got this little body here too. And it's going to go off my page, and that's okay. What I'm going to do first is just color the whole thing in really lightly. And then I'm going to go back and make sure that the shadow that is closest to my snowman is actually the darkest. Now that I'm finished with those steps, I can go ahead and start adding my details. So for example, I can color in my hat, my trees, my branches, I suppose, here. And then I'm also going to pick one object that I'm actually going to show color with. For me, since my snowman is looking up here at this cardinal up here, I think it might look really nice if that part is colored in for me. When I feel like I've done a pretty good job, then I like to go back over with some chalk pastel and just make my lightest spots just a little bit brighter. I don't like using chalk pastel for everything because it can become messy and it can smudge pretty easily. So for example, right here, I'm going to start by making my moon a little bit brighter. I'm actually going to use my fingers and smudge it around to make it look like it's glowing a little bit. Then maybe I can go back and color over it one last time and blow away any excess there. If you don't like using your fingers, because it does have some kind of a really tough texture to deal with, you can go ahead and use tissue for that step as well. Then I'm also going to look at the spots that will be the brightest on my snowman, and I might just make them just a little bit brighter. Okay, because the chalk pastel does come out much more brightly than my crayons do here. And it just makes it pop just a bit more. But I want to make sure that I'm still keeping it sort of in this circular motion here, this circular pattern for my light spots. And if I cover anything up by accident later, I can always go back over it with a black crayon and just sort of go over that step again. All right. You can see that pops out way more than what it did before.